Part 1. The Stars Above the Desert. What if the night sky you see above you tonight is not just a view of stars, but a time machine into the past? The desert was quiet, wrapped in a velvet darkness that stretched endlessly to the horizon. Only the cool breath of night moved through the air, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant sage. Above, the sky unfolded in its full glory. Thousands upon thousands of stars, glittering like shards of ice scattered across black silk. For those who looked up, it was more than just beauty. It was history, written in light. Every star that shimmered overhead was telling a story from long ago. The light of Sirius, the brightest jewel in the sky, had left its star nearly 9 years earlier, crossing the void of space to reach this desert night. Farther still, the light of Betelgeuse, glowing faintly red in Orion's shoulder, had begun its journey more than 600 years ago, back when castles still stood across Europe and sails first touched distant oceans. To gaze at the stars was to gaze backward in time. Somewhere on the rocky ledge, an old telescope rested, its metal cool beneath the moonlight. Through its lens, the vastness became intimate. Galaxies revealed themselves as smudges of pale light, millions of light years away. Each one held billions of suns, billions of worlds, perhaps billions of unknown stories. The human mind could barely grasp it, yet it felt comforting somehow, like knowing you were part of something infinite. Astronomers often say that the universe is both impossibly huge and impossibly close. The atoms in our bodies, the very iron in our blood, were once forged in the heart of ancient stars that died long before Earth was born. To look at the Milky Way arcing across the desert sky was to look at family, distant, scattered, but kin nonetheless. A quiet breeze passed, and the desert seemed to listen. One could almost imagine the whisper of galaxies themselves speaking across time. We were here before you, and we will be here long after, but for this moment, we are together. And in that silence, something profound settled in. The night sky was not an empty canvas. It was alive with memory, with echoes of beginnings, with a promise that the story of the universe was still unfolding, and humanity had only just begun to read the first lines.
Part 2. The First Steps into the Sky. Long before rockets or satellites, long before electricity or machines, people were already reaching for the stars, not with hands, but with eyes and imagination. Thousands of years ago, humans stood under skies just as dark and wide as the desert night. With no city lights, the heavens were brilliant, so filled with stars that the Milky Way stretched across the horizon like a glowing river. Ancient people did not just see dots of light, they saw stories, gods, and maps. On the plains of Mesopotamia, Babylonian astronomers carved star patterns onto clay tablets, tracking the rhythms of Venus and Jupiter. In Egypt, the rise of Sirius marked the flooding of the Nile, a moment that gave life to the land. Across the ocean, the Maya built entire temples aligned with the sun and stars so that on certain days, light would pour into sacred chambers like a message from the heavens. And in the frozen north, the Vikings steered their ships by the pole star, trusting it as a steady guide in the endless sea. All around the world, people looked up and asked the same question: what lies beyond? Centuries passed, and answers began to change. The Greeks imagined celestial spheres. Ptolemy described a universe with Earth at its heart. For over 1,000 years, that picture stood unshaken. But then, slowly, voices rose that dared to imagine differently. In 1543, Nicholas Copernicus whispered a radical thought. Perhaps the sun, not Earth, sat at the center. Later, Galileo Galilei turned his telescope skyward and saw mountains on the moon, moons orbiting Jupiter, and the faint light of countless stars inside the Milky Way. He realized the universe was far richer than anyone had dreamed. The centuries rolled on, and every discovery pulled humanity's gaze farther outward. Newton explained gravity, the invisible hand that tethered apples to Earth and planets to the sun. Herschel revealed Uranus, a planet no eye had noticed before. And in the 20th century, Edwin Hubble showed that even the faint smudges in the night sky were galaxies, entire universes of their own. Yet the longing remained. People wanted not only to look, but to go. The first rockets were crude, born from fire and war, but they carried a promise. One day, humanity would ride them beyond the cradle of Earth. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first to leave our planet, circling Earth in a fragile capsule. His voice calm as he said, "I see Earth. It is so beautiful." That moment changed everything. For the first time, humanity had truly stepped into the sky. From ancient stargazers to astronauts, the story of reaching for the stars was no longer just myth or dream. It was reality, unfolding before human eyes. And as Earth spun beneath, blue and delicate against the black, one truth became clear. The universe was vast, but the journey had only just begun.
Part 3. The Race to the Moon. The night sky had always been filled with mysteries, but now, for the first time in history, people weren't just staring at the moon, they were preparing to go there. The 1960s unfolded like a drama written among the stars. The world's two great powers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were locked in a silent duel, a competition not just of technology, but of imagination. Who would prove first that humanity belonged beyond Earth? The Soviets struck first. Sputnik, the tiny beeping satellite, circled our planet in 1957, shocking the world. Soon after, Yuri Gagarin's smiling face became a symbol of possibility as he looked at Earth from orbit. The Americans, stunned but determined, set their eyes on something even greater, sending a human to the moon. In 1961, U.S. President John F. Kennedy spoke words that carried the weight of an impossible dream. "We choose to go to the moon." At that moment, the destination shifted from fantasy to a promise. The years that followed were a blur of triumphs and disasters. Rockets exploded, astronauts risked their lives, engineers worked through sleepless nights. Each Apollo mission brought humanity a step closer, first orbiting Earth, then testing the spacecraft in deeper space, until finally, Apollo 11 was ready. On July 16, 1969, the Saturn V rocket, taller than a 35-story building and powerful enough to shake the ground for miles, thundered into the sky. On board were three men, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. For 4 days, they sailed through the void, their tiny capsule a fragile speck between Earth and Moon. Then came the moment. The lunar module, named Eagle, separated from the command ship. With Armstrong and Aldrin inside, it descended toward the Sea of Tranquility. The world held its breath as Armstrong's calm voice crackled through the radio. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Hours later, Armstrong climbed down the ladder, his boot hovering just above the alien soil. He pressed down, leaving a print that would remain for thousands of years. His words, broadcast to millions on Earth, were simple and eternal. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Buzz Aldrin followed, describing the moon's surface as magnificent desolation. Together they planted a flag, set up experiments, and wandered in wonder. Michael Collins, circling above in the command module, later wrote that he felt both isolated and deeply connected, the only human truly alone, yet carrying the hopes of all humanity. When the astronauts returned, the world was never the same. Children looked at the moon and knew humans had been there. The night sky was no longer untouchable. It was a destination. The moon landing was not just a victory in a race. It was proof of what humanity could achieve when driven by curiosity, courage, and unity. For a moment, the divisions of Earth seemed small compared to the footprints in lunar dust. And as Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins sailed back home, Earth rose before them, fragile, blue, and glowing against the infinite black. They had traveled 240,000 miles away, yet they discovered something profound. The most beautiful place in the universe was still their home. Part 4. Homes Among the Stars. If landing on the moon was humanity's first great leap, then learning to stay in space was its first lesson in patience. After Apollo 11, the world was awash with wonder. Yet after a handful of missions, the moon began to feel less like a dream and more like a conquered milestone. Governments shifted focus, budgets tightened, and a new question rose. Instead of only visiting space, could we learn to live there? The Soviets moved first again, launching Salyut-1 in 1971, the first space station. It was small, no larger than a bus, but to the cosmonauts who entered it, it felt like a new frontier. They floated through its narrow halls, working, sleeping, and eating, while Earth drifted silently beneath them. For the first time, humans weren't just astronauts, they were space dwellers. The United States answered with a marvel of its own, Skylab, launched in 1973. It was bigger, brighter, and allowed crews to stay in orbit for weeks. From Skylab's windows, astronauts filmed sun flares and gazed at continents stretching endlessly below. They even held the first space shower, experimenting on how to stay clean when water refused to fall. But humanity's true long-term home in orbit would not come until decades later, when rival nations set aside their race and began building together. The result was the International Space Station, ISS, a vast city of metal modules and solar panels that still orbits Earth today. Construction began in 1998. Piece by piece, carried by rockets and the space shuttle, the ISS grew like a puzzle assembled in the sky. Astronauts from across the globe, Americans, Russians, Europeans, Japanese, Canadians, all brought their cultures, their languages, and their dreams. Life aboard the ISS was unlike anything ever imagined. Astronauts slept in small cabins, zipped into sleeping bags that floated against the walls. Meals came in packets that had to be hydrated before eating, and even drinking water required a straw so it wouldn't drift away in globules. Every day was carefully planned. Hours of scientific experiments, maintenance, exercise, and communication with Earth. And yet, beyond the routine, there were moments of pure wonder. Astronauts watched 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets each day as the station circled the planet. They marveled at the glowing bands of the aurora dancing below. Sometimes, during quiet nights, they pressed their foreheads to the window, staring at Earth as a glowing jewel floating in darkness, feeling both infinitely small and unimaginably lucky. The ISS became more than just a laboratory. It was a symbol. For centuries, nations had fought over borders on a single planet. But here, hundreds of kilometers above Earth, people learned to cooperate, to share oxygen, water, and trust. When astronauts returned to Earth, many spoke of the overview effect,
a shift in perspective from seeing our world whole without lines or borders, fragile and united. One Russian cosmonaut described it best. When you first look out the window and see Earth, you suddenly realize we are all family. The moon had been about conquering distance. The space stations were about conquering time. They taught us how to endure in the void, how to breathe, work, and dream in microgravity. They taught us that space was not just a place to visit, it could be a home. And as the ISS continued circling, the question that had burned since the Apollo days returned with even greater force. If we could live in orbit, what about Mars?
Part 5. Shuttles and Rovers and the Call of Mars. If space stations were about learning how to stay, the space shuttle was about learning how to return again and again. In 1981, the world watched in awe as Columbia roared into the sky, not on the tip of a rocket, but on wings, with the promise of flying back like an airplane. The space shuttle program had begun, and with it, a new chapter in exploration. For 3 decades, the shuttle fleet, Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour, carried astronauts into orbit, ferried modules to build the International Space Station, and deployed satellites like the Hubble Space Telescope. Unlike Apollo, this was not a one-way ticket. The shuttle could land on a runway, roll to a stop, and be prepared for its next flight. The shuttle symbolized routine access to space, but it also carried deep risks. The tragedies of Challenger in 1986 and Columbia in 2003 reminded the world that spaceflight was never ordinary, never safe. Each loss was a painful scar, brave crews giving their lives in pursuit of something larger than themselves. Yet even through grief, the missions continued. While humans orbited Earth, robotic explorers became our eyes and hands across the solar system. In 1997, Sojourner, a small 6-wheeled rover, landed on Mars with NASA's Pathfinder mission. It was no larger than a microwave, but it showed the world that Mars could be touched, studied, and explored by our machines. The images it sent back were surreal. Orange-red landscapes under a salmon sky, rocks shaped by ancient winds, a world frozen in silence. Then came the Mars rovers Spirit and Opportunity in 2004. Designed to last only 90 days, Opportunity rolled on for an astonishing 15 years, driving across craters, dunes, and plains, whispering secrets of a planet that may have once held rivers and lakes. When its final signal faded in 2018 after a global dust storm, NASA scientists said goodbye with words that moved the world. "My battery is low, and it's getting dark." And above Earth, the Hubble Space Telescope, launched in 1990, gave humanity its clearest view yet of the cosmos. Through Hubble's lens, we saw galaxies colliding, stars being born in glowing nebula, and light from the edge of the universe, billions of years old, finally reaching us. Some scientists wept at the images, feeling for the first time that they were truly looking into eternity. But beyond telescopes and rovers, the dream of Mars began to grow stronger. If humans could live in orbit, could they also walk on the red planet? Engineers, scientists, and dreamers debated everything: how to survive the radiation, how to grow food, and how to return safely. The shuttle retired in 2011, but it left behind the International Space Station and a new generation of private space companies determined to carry the torch further. Space was no longer the domain of governments alone. It was becoming a new frontier for humanity as a whole.
Through every success and setback, one idea kept echoing. Earth is our cradle, but not our cage. The rovers had shown us the path. The telescopes had shown us the stars. And the next step, the boldest of all, was clear. The next great journey would not stop at orbit. It would not stop at the moon. It would point directly to Mars.
Part 6. A New Dawn. Private Spaceflight and the Artemis Generation. For the first time in history, space was no longer just about nations. It was about people, companies, and the shared dream of an entire species. After the Space Shuttle retired in 2011, NASA relied on Russian Soyuz spacecraft to carry astronauts to the International Space Station. It was a strange pause. The United States, once the leader of human spaceflight, had no vehicle of its own to reach orbit. But in the silence of that gap, something unexpected began. A new era of private space exploration. One company, SpaceX, founded by Elon Musk, had a vision that seemed more like science fiction than engineering. Reusable rockets that could land themselves. Spaceships that could carry people to the moon, to Mars, even to other worlds. At first, many laughed. Rockets had always fallen into the sea, destroyed in fire and waves. Landing them seemed impossible. But on a December night in 2015, the world watched as a Falcon 9 rocket descended from the sky and touched down upright, its engines glowing against the darkness. It stood tall, balanced as though it had never left. The impossible was now real. From that moment, the future of spaceflight shifted. SpaceX began flying cargo and then astronauts to the ISS. Other companies, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Virgin Galactic, joined the race, each with its own bold vision. What once took governments decades and billions of dollars, private innovators were now doing it faster, cheaper, and with breathtaking ambition. Meanwhile, NASA turned its gaze back to the moon. The Artemis program, named after Apollo's twin sister, was announced with a promise: to land the first woman and the first person of color on the lunar surface, and to use the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. Artemis wasn't just about visiting, it was about building a sustainable presence, with habitats, vehicles, and a space station orbiting the moon called Gateway. In 2022, Artemis 1 launched, the most powerful rocket since Saturn V, called the Space Launch System, SLS. It carried the Orion spacecraft on a journey around the moon, uncrewed but blazing a trail for the missions to come. When it returned safely to Earth, it felt like the drumbeat of a new age. But perhaps the most stunning vision of all came not from rockets, but from light. In July 2022, humanity unveiled the first images from the James Webb Space Telescope. Where Hubble had shown us galaxies colliding, Webb showed us the earliest galaxies ever born, glowing faintly at the dawn of time. It looked back over 13 billion years, almost to the moment when the first stars flickered into being. Scientists stared at the images in silence. Some cried, others laughed with disbelief. It was as if the universe itself had opened a curtain and invited us to witness its secrets. And still, the dream of Mars burns brighter. SpaceX's Starship, the largest rocket ever built, is designed to carry hundreds of people at once. Its stainless steel body gleams in the sunlight like something pulled from a retro sci-fi film. Test flights explode, crash, and fail, yet each time they rise again, improving, moving closer to the day when one will succeed. For the first time since Apollo, children grow up not just hearing stories about space,
But seeing rockets land, telescopes unveil cosmic mysteries, and missions preparing to go farther than ever before. The new dawn has arrived. Humanity no longer asks, will we go back, but rather, how far can we go? And the answer, whispered in every launch, every rover, every telescope, is simple. As far as our dreams will take us.
Part 7. The Future, Mars, Beyond, and the Question of Life. Every age of exploration has its frontier. For the 21st century, the frontier is not across oceans or deserts. It is across the infinite sea of stars. For decades, Mars has been more than a planet. It has been a symbol of hope, of challenge, of destiny. At night, it glows red in the sky, a reminder that another world circles close, waiting. Scientists know its secrets are buried in the dust, dried riverbeds, frozen glaciers, maybe even the remnants of ancient life. Rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance have already begun uncovering that story. Perseverance, still rolling across Jezero Crater, carries a microphone that lets us hear the whisper of Martian wind. It collects samples of rock, sealing them in tiny tubes, waiting for the day a future mission returns them to Earth. If those rocks reveal signs of microbes, even long dead, it will mean that life is not unique to our world, that it can arise wherever conditions allow. And if it happened twice in one solar system, how many times across billions of galaxies? Mars is also the target for human footsteps. NASA, SpaceX, and other agencies talk about the 2030s. It will not be easy. The journey takes months. The environment is harsh, the dangers immense. But every great leap in history has been filled with risk. The first settlers may live inside caves or in pressurized habitats, growing food under glass domes, relying on Earth but dreaming of independence. Someday, children may be born on Mars, their first sight of the sky a salmon-colored horizon beneath two tiny moons. Beyond Mars lies the outer solar system with its icy treasures. Moons like Europa and Enceladus hide oceans beneath their frozen shells, oceans larger than all the water on Earth combined. Plumes of water shoot into space, hinting at hydrothermal vents, warmth, chemistry. Could life exist there, swimming in alien seas under starlight that never touches the surface? NASA's Europa Clipper and future missions may soon bring answers. Asteroids, too, beckon. They are not just rocks, but resources, metals, water, the building blocks of industries that could fuel colonies and spacecraft. Mining them sounds like science fiction, but private companies already design concepts for it. One day, whole economies could stretch into space. And then the greatest question of all, the stars. For now, they are impossibly far. The nearest, Proxima Centauri, is 4.24 light-years away, a distance so vast that even our fastest spacecraft would take tens of thousands of years to reach it. But humanity does not stop at impossible. Projects like Breakthrough Starshot imagine sending tiny, laser-powered probes to another star within a single human lifetime. They would fly faster than anything built before, carrying cameras and sensors the size of a chip, sending back images of alien worlds orbiting suns we can barely see with the naked eye. And above it all hangs the question, are we alone? Radio telescopes listen for signals. Scientists scan exoplanets for atmospheres rich with oxygen, methane, or strange chemicals that could only be made by living creatures. We have found thousands of planets already, some rocky, some with oceans, some orbiting in the habitable zone. Statistically, it seems impossible that Earth is the only world with life. But until the day we hear a signal, or find a fossil, or see a cell swimming under a microscope from another world, we do not know.
Perhaps the universe is full of civilizations separated by distance and time. Perhaps we are the first, the pioneers, destined to carry the spark of consciousness outward into the stars. What is certain is this: the story of space is only at its beginning. Our ancestors looked at the sky with fear and wonder. We look at it with curiosity and courage. Someday our descendants may look at it from new worlds, from cities on Mars, from ships sailing between the stars. And when they do, they will remember that it began here with a species on a small blue planet daring to dream.
Part 8. The Endless Sky. At night, when the world falls quiet, the sky opens like a book. Each star a page, each galaxy a chapter, and we are only beginning to read. Space has always been both infinite and intimate. Infinite in its distances, its mysteries, its ancient light that has traveled for millions of years before touching our eyes. And intimate in the way it whispers to us, in the way a child points to a constellation and feels connected to something greater. From the first fires our ancestors lit under dark skies, to the telescopes that pierce the veil of time itself, humanity's gaze has never left the stars. We have always been a species of dreamers, carried forward by wonder. We now know the universe is vast beyond comprehension. Trillions of stars, trillions of worlds, perhaps countless civilizations, or perhaps only silence. Both possibilities are equally profound. If we are alone, then we carry a responsibility to cherish life, to protect it, and to let it bloom among the stars. If we are not, then one day, across the gulf of light years, we may learn we are part of a grander story than we ever imagined. The future is unwritten, but the direction is clear. Mars glows on the horizon, beckoning us forward. Oceans under icy moons call to us with the possibility of strange new life. Distant exoplanets tempt us with the dream of stepping onto worlds that circle suns we have only just discovered. And above all, the stars remain, patient and eternal, waiting for us. In the quiet of night, when we close our eyes, it is comforting to know that the universe is not empty space, but a living sea of possibility. Every star is a lighthouse, every nebula a cradle, every orbit a dance. We may never see all of it. We may never hold the answers to every question, but we are part of this vastness, stitched into the same fabric of space and time. Our atoms were born in stars that lived and died long before Earth existed. To look at the night sky is to look at our origin, and perhaps also our destiny. So tonight, as sleep drifts closer, imagine the journey still ahead. Ships sailing past Saturn's rings, footsteps echoing on Martian soil, explorers diving into the oceans of Europa, signals whispering from far-off civilizations. Imagine generations yet to come, gazing at new skies, telling new stories, always guided by the same wonder that lives in us now.
Epilogue: A quiet universe. Sometimes the most profound discoveries are not made in the roar of rockets, but in the silence between heartbeats under the stars. There is a kind of peace in knowing that the universe is not in a hurry. Stars live for billions of years. Galaxies drift slowly, colliding in dances that last longer than all of human history. Compared to that, our lives are brief, but they are no less meaningful. Every time a child makes a wish on a falling star, or an astronomer peers through a telescope, the universe takes on a human shape. Our curiosity, our need to connect, our longing to understand, These are the qualities that turn an infinite expanse of stars into a home. Astronauts often describe something called the overview effect, the shift in perspective when they see Earth from orbit. From space, there are no borders, no divisions, only a fragile blue world floating in darkness. They return changed, gentler, more aware of how precious life is. Perhaps, in a way, that is the purpose of looking outward, to remind us to care for what we have here, to see ourselves not as separate nations, but as travelers sharing one vessel, circling one star, journeying together. And when the night deepens and the stars emerge, it is easy to imagine that someone, somewhere, is looking back, a traveler on a distant world, perhaps, gazing up and wondering if they are alone. Perhaps their eyes fall upon our sun, just another star in their sky, and they wonder what lives might be circling it. The universe is vast, but it is also intimate. It touches us in ways both grand and quiet, in the glow of Saturn's rings, in the silence of lunar dust, in the shimmer of auroras dancing across polar skies, and in the way your heart slows as you drift into sleep, comforted by the thought of endless possibility. So, rest now. Imagine yourself weightless, floating among galaxies. Let starlight guide your dreams. And remember, the universe is not something far away. It is already inside you. Sleep well, explorer. Tomorrow, the journey continues.